Okay, we should be live. Let me just tweet out that we are live. Okay, I see 3 viewers. Anyone is here, they can say hello in chat. Gonna wait for about 2 or 3 more minutes before I begin in earnest. Can you all hear me? If you can, please say yes in chat. Oh, there we go. Hi, Colin. Can you hear me? Perfect. I'm trying to make things, I'll explain this a little more later, but right now I've got the web pages displaying decently. Technical difficulties, it doesn't look like I'll be able to stream directly from my Excel spreadsheet like I was hoping to, but I have a workaround which is kind of janky, but I'm going to do my best with the workaround. That'll be from the neutral zone data, so we'll deal with that when we can. So yeah, just giving it about, let's say, 2 or 3 more minutes before we begin. Thank you everyone for tuning in if they are actually doing so. Leave off. Look at Dennis Seidenberg, and underutilized is not the right word. Okay. 1 more minute, guys, and then we'll begin. What do you mean not live, Colin? Okay. Yeah, YouTube being dumb sounds right. Okay, so 9:07. Let's get this show on the road. So, trying to start this more formally than what I was doing before. Welcome to the second 2017-18 Isles videocast. I guess sponsored by Lighthouse Hockey. I'm Garrick16, for those of you who somehow don't know that. Um, For those who are new to the videocast, this is essentially a live podcast where you can interact with me via chat, as well as a videocast, meaning I can actually put things up and display things as I'm talking about them. For those who are new, for copyright reasons, because I want this to last more than the stream and don't want it to be taken down and have a strike against my account, I won't be showing live video on this stream, even though I sometimes want to. That's why I haven't actually live streamed myself tracking the neutral zone for the same reason. Technically illegal, and I'd prefer to keep my YouTube account. But at the same time, we can go through stats and basically other viz that shows basically what I'm talking about, and I can talk to you guys, and you can ask me questions as we go on. If you have any questions you want to save till the end, you can. I will try and interact with them if they're on topic as I go along. If not, I will interact with them. At the end, I will take questions and answer them near the end of the stream. So we are now 15 games into the Islanders season. They are occupying a playoff spot, but not by much. And Mike, on topic, I meant. Anyhow, when, at this point, 15 games is a decent amount where we have some sort of idea what the Isles look like. Most players we have currently, I think about only a few players who haven't played every game. Only 4 forwards, only really 2 forward spots have been in flux. And on defense, well, we've had 8 defensemen. 4, I believe, have played every game. Leddy, Boychuk, DeHaan, and no, only 3 have played every game. Leddy, Boychuk, and DeHaan, whereas Hickey's missed a few. Pelech, Mayfield, Seidenberg, and Pulak all have a little less than full. But we have enough right now to give some idea of where we are. And so I really want to go through that. I have on this browser page that you have here on the left side, I have basically a bunch of Natural Stat Trick, a very good statistic website for basically showing this stuff. Up about 6 pages I think are pretty interesting to go through to start. I may call up some other pages as we go along, basically as such. In fact, I'm already thinking of one right now, which I probably should have called up before I started the stream, but I was having technical difficulties, so I didn't think about it. I'll get to that when we get there. Let's start by discussing the forwards. Because, believe it or not, the defense has more or less performed as well as the Isles could have hoped. One exception on that, we'll get to him later, but for the most part, the defense there really isn't any holes in the defense. The Isles, on average right now, for those of you who follow this sort of thing, in fact, I'm actually going to pull that up as I can. Yeah. So the Isles right now, this page right here, if you have never been to Puck on Net, which is one of a couple stat sites. Basically, one of the things they show is score-adjusted Corsi. I'm going to pop it venue-adjusted for the sake of things. Doesn't really make any difference. For those who are new to stats and whatnot, score-adjusted base Corsi is basically just what percentage of shots taken, not on net, taken does the team have. So 50% means they're even on shots, above 50% means they're outshooting their opponents, etc., etc. And this is score and venue adjusted, meaning it is adjusting for the effects that we know happen when the score changes. So if you're leading a game, you will get outshot because you will defensively shell a little bit, and the other side will get desperate. If you are trailing, you will take more shots. The Isles are around 10th or 11th. They're 11th right now with a 51.5% score adjusted Corsi, which is fairly solid. That's a pretty good number. That's much better than last year where they were around 48. And, it's not dominant. It's above average, essentially. Like I said, 10th or 11th. So you're in the top third of the league, but just the top third of the league. That Isles team from 3 years ago now, which lost to the Capitals, was seemingly dominant, had like about a 55%. The year after that, they were around 50. This would be an upgrade over the last 2 years. So that's nice. But I want to talk about how we got there. And again, the large factor here is the forward core, not the defenseman. So I've called up here the Natural Stat Trick. Again, this is naturalstattrick.com, a very good website for getting possession. By possession, I mean stats like Corsi, as well as some other stats, basically tailored to how the team is doing. And I've called up Nat Stat Trick because I think this is a pretty clear demonstration of how the Isles have been this season so far. In that you see right here a big gap. You have here 5 forwards who are much better. To see this column here that's highlighted, this one right here, where my pointer is the Corsi fielded percentage. So this is the percentage of shots. And you have 5 forwards who are well ahead of the rest, with a 6th forward above 50%. And those are Matt Barzal, who leads the team at age 20. Meaning when Matt Barzal's on the ice, the Islanders have outshot opponents 210 to 155 at 5-on-5. That's really good. In fact, that's incredibly good. And basically, you see your top 2 lines here. You have Barzal, Everly, Ladd, Liam Tavares well ahead of the rest of the team. Josh Bailey is the other forward who's above 50%, but he's a bit behind the others. We can discuss why that is later, but for whatever reason, Bailey is a little step behind, but still clearly above the rest. In fact, if you use Fenwick, which is the same type of stat, shots, but excluding block shots, the gap between Bailey and the next best forward increases a bit. So clearly, you've got 6 forwards, and that happens to be your top 6 right there, who are quite significantly better than the rest. And then your remaining 6 forwards, a bit not quite so great. So you've got, now you'll notice there's 7 forwards here because we're including Josh Hosang, but we'll get to him in a second. So you've got Cizikas as your number 7. Cizikas, Casey has had a very good year, to be honest. There's some good and bad about Casey. The team kind of over-relies on him. But he has done a pretty admirable job, especially given who he's had to be lined with this year. And in fact, they're actually, I'm going to scroll over all the way, and I hate this because I was asking the website owner if he could fix this, but he's apparently struggling himself. So you notice here, this year, Waite is basically burying Cizikas' line in the defensive zone to start shifts. Now, I want a word of caution here. The amount of time this last column here, which is what I'm referring to, is the percentage of your shifts you start on a face-off, the percentage of face-offs you take in each zone. So Matt Barzal, 60% of his face-offs are in the offensive zone, not counting neutral zone face-offs. So he's had 52 offensive zone face-offs, 33 defensive zone face-offs. Whereas Casey's had 77 defensive zone face-offs and 36 offensive. Now, again, I don't want to emphasize here. We used to think this stat, which is also known as zone starts, made a lot more difference than it did. It really doesn't. There's not a large adjustment in there. That said, I haven't seen an Islander with that much defensive focus in a while. I don't remember this being the case last year, and the last time an Islander was so much basically buried was Zdeno Konopka way back. That may have been pre-Capuano. I can't even remember. Again, that really doesn't adjust the stats that much, but the fact that Casey is just barely below even in Corsi is a pretty solid performance. Casey's your fourth liner, and your fourth liners, if your fourth liner is pulling even with the other team, you're in good shape. Obviously you prefer it to be better because your fourth liners are usually playing other fourth liners. Yeah, said an awesome wine salesman. But at the same time, if your fourth liner is going even with the opponents, you should be doing well because your other line should be doing better. And in fact, in terms of just shots on goal, Casey's actually above 50%, joining the rest of those above average players I mentioned before. Casey has been very solid. Overpaid, but still very solid for what he performs. The problem is the other guys. So you'll notice here the other 6 players are the rest of your bottom 6, as well as Joshua Hosang, who we'll get to again in a second. And you'll notice here that, first of all, your worst player in the team has been Nikolai Kulemin, who just is now out for a while with injury. It's not really saying much right now. Kulemin has been bad. He doesn't provide much scoring even on a good year, which means that if Kulemin isn't playing good possession hockey, it's kind of hard to justify him being on the ice. And so, with Kulemin being out for a while, that might wind up being a plus for the Isles. Not guaranteed, but it might wind up being a plus. But let's put aside Kulemin for now, because it sounds like he'll be gone for at least a month. We'll find out more shortly. But then you've got guys, and we'll add one more player here, because I want to pretty much go through him very quickly, because I don't think there's much to talk about. Jason Chimera. Anyone who follows me knows that I have basically thought Jason Chimera was a waste of space since before he got to the Islanders. Chimera, it's weird. Chimera's the type of guy who we always call attention on the ice to his speed, but his speed is such that he doesn't really use it very well. I don't know whether it's instincts. My fair warning is that I am not I'm not a scout. I don't really, if I watch a hockey game and I'm not specifically tracking something, I don't think my eyes are good enough to really judge whether someone is doing something right or not. Now, I track the neutral zone, as I'll get to later, but aside from that, I'm not sure when I watch Jason Chimera why it is, whether it's just a lack of IQ, whether it's just something that he doesn't quite know how to use his speed, whether his speed only goes in certain forms. But Chimera, he's got his speed, but is absolute garbage defensively, and has been for his entire career. His defensive numbers have always been basically, ass. And so he's second worst in Corsi this year. And he's had a lot of minutes compared to some other guys. He's actually had more minutes in 5-on-5 than Casey Cizikas, which seems insane and should probably stop. And the problem is that if Chimera's running good, you want Chimera to be scoring some goals. You want about 20 goals out of Chimera a year, and maybe you can get away with some awful defense. But the goals aren't coming. And Chimera is 38, and he's a free agent after this year. You really, for a successful team, should be thinking about trying to move on from Chimera sooner rather than later. And I don't understand why the team wouldn't consider trying to do so before the end of the season, even if that means acquiring another player. I'm not just talking Josh Hosang here, because as I'll get to in a bit, there are other slots here. The dirty secret is that every Islander fan right now thinks Josh Hosang will fix his team, and while I agree Hosang probably helps in the long run, and I'll get to that, there's about 3 or 4 players right now who are playing poorly. And so removing Jason Chimera and replacing him with one other player is not necessarily fixing the team. It is just improving it. So then I want to get to, and again I'm skipping Hosang for now, I want to get to Beauvillier. I had said in the season preview, which was before I think we knew the lines, that I was kind of surprised Beauvillier did not start the season in the AHL. And that had Cal Clutterbuck not gotten injured, and had the Islanders had a more clear forward lead, had Quine and Prince not been injured, I would have expected Beauvillier to start the season in the AHL. The reason for that is, as I discussed in actually an off-season stream, is that Beauvillier was bad last year. He was bad. He was pretty damn awful. In fact, here's last year's numbers. And yeah, Anthony Beauvillier was the worst player on the team in terms of possession. And he didn't provide that much offense. Now again, Anthony Beauvillier is right now in his age 20 season. He's young for his draft class. Not super young, but pretty young. And last year he was 19. So him being bad last year and him being pretty bad this year does not mean that Beauvillier is going to be bad for his career. I just want to make that clear. But there's just a lot of evidence right now that Beauvillier is basically performing very, very poorly. And given that fact, and it's not, by the way, just his line mates. So, I'm going to get to this in a second right here, but Beauvillier has basically played a lot of his time with, say, Brock Nelson and Jason Chimera, also a little bit without both guys. And he has just been basically dragging both those guys down to worse heights. The page I have right now, also from Natural Stat Trick, breaks down player performance with other players and without them. So the first two rows right here, which I'm going to highlight, show the numbers, and it's a small sample, we're only about 45 minutes here, of Beauvillier, Nelson, and Chimera, and then Beauvillier, Nelson without Chimera. And we're at 44%, 40%. Those are bad numbers. Beauvillier's played a little bit without both those players, and he's actually at 50%. But there's a good reason for that we'll get to in a second, which is that if Beauvillier's not playing with Nelson or Chimera, that means he's playing with Matt Barzal. And if he's playing with Matt Barzal, well, it's not this one, is it? Sorry. Did I do this one twice? I did. Hold on a second. That should be this one. Yep. So this right here is, and I mentioned this on Twitter as a little preview here. This is, and again, we'll get to Nelson in a second. This is Beauvillier, Nelson, and Barzal. Because if Beauvillier's basically played nearly entirely, he's played a little bit without both those guys, which you can see right here. He's played 45 minutes without both of those guys. But for the most part, his minutes have been with those two guys. And when Beauvillier is with Barzal, that's this column, the numbers are very good. When Beauvillier is not with Barzal, and he's with Nelson, numbers are pretty awful. Matt Barzal is the key factor here. But the thing is that Barzal has performed even better without Beauvillier, which suggests that at best case scenario, Beauvillier is dragging people down, not just being dragged down. He's not there yet. Again, the kid is super young. He's got a lot of talent. You can see flashes, but it makes very little sense right now for him to be playing where he is. It's not working. Getting back to the next player I want to discuss, which I already saw me talking there, is again Brock Nelson. Again, the Matt Barzal situation is pretty big here. When Nelson has been on Barzal's wing, so Nelson plus Barzal is this column right here, basically. Barzal's been pretty awesome with him. They work really well together. When Nelson's been on center, which means he's not playing with Barzal, the numbers are bad. Again, the number is basically it's around like 45%. It's been really bad. And that's been the problem. The third line with Nelson center has been really bad, or third line with Nelson at wing and Beauvillier there. Um, and that's been a struggle for a while. For about 2 or 3 years now, Nelson has been a negative player defensively. And it didn't start that way. Nelson started his career as a very good defensive forward, in addition to being a very good goal scorer. And for whatever reason, the numbers for defense have been lousy for a few years now. And before you ask, it's not just Jason Chimera. So I have here, again, similar type thing without Jason Chimera. And you got to be tricky here because you have Matt Barzal against as a conflicting factor. And basically, yeah, Chimera has been a problem hasn't helped him. But when he's played center without Barzal and Chimera there, so that would be in this case the Nelson, no Beauvillier, no Barzal, he's still been bad. So, it's just basically Nelson has been bad. He had a couple goals early with Josh Hosang there. Now, getting to Hosang really quickly, Hosang possession-wise, wasn't good this year, and he was basically playing entirely with Nelson. Now, last year, Josh Hosang was one of the best possession players in the team. He was awesome. You could see that. And so the numbers weren't there this year. So you could make a case that he made sense for the team to send down. The problem with that is that you had 6 games this year compared to 20 last year, and Hosang was great last year. Whereas Beauvillier was awful last year, is a year younger, and has still been awful. So yeah, if you're trying to improve this team right now, you would probably consider, believe it or not, keeping Chimera for now, swapping out, demoting Beauvillier, and putting Hosang in the NHL. You may do that. You may also scratch Chimera for Alan Quine. The problem with the Alan Quine thing, by the way, just to do that really quickly, is that Quine was bad last year. So this is last year's numbers. You see your top line of Tavares, Lee, and Bailey at your top. Cizikas, again, was basically second line, because we didn't have a second line center who was any good last year. And Alan Quine is near the dump. Quine was not good last year. And Quine probably isn't going to be good. He's not super young. He was never a real prospect. There's a reason for that. Alan Quine is not a great player. That doesn't mean he can't improve the team. Again, I would probably rather try Quine than Chimera, in that Chimera is probably only getting worse at this point. Quine is not. And Quine might be able to outperform Chimera. And right now, in fact, the lines that were being practiced today, the Islanders website posted, suggested that they are planning on playing Quine as third-line center and put Nelson at second line. Again, Nelson's done well with Barzal, because everyone's done well with Barzal. Again, Barzal has been the best driving play on the damn team this year, and probably our best forward. But, so I actually do like Barzal, Nelson slotting over to second line, demoting Ladd, because I think Nelson's a better pure goal scorer who could take advantage of that. I'm not convinced that Quine, Ladd, Beauvillier makes a good third line, because Beauvillier has been ass. Quine wasn't good last year, and Ladd is basically an average player. The numbers have been great this year, but they've been great because of Matt Barzal. Again, Barzal skews everything. That's good and bad, but it's a major factor. The Isles haven't had a second line center like this. In fact, it's very interesting. Barzal, I guess I'm going on a tangent here, but whatever, I'm going to do it. It's my stream. Barzal, believe it or not, his physical profile reminds me very much of Frans Nielsen. For those who saw my article earlier this week on Lighthouse Hockey, I track every game in the neutral zone. What that means is I track every time each team during an Islander game at 5v5 gets the puck from the neutral zone into one of the other two zones. So, and then I track how that happens. So, does an Islander carry the puck into the offensive zone? Do they dump it in? Does the opponent carry it in? Does the opponent dump it in? And through that, I'm able to basically track A, who is the best performers to get the puck in individually, and B, how the team is doing on the ice in the neutral zone with each player. Franz Nielsen, so to compare some players, for years when I tracked this, you had two players who were great at getting the puck into the zone with possession, carrying the puck in rushes. And that was John Tavares and Franz Nielsen. But Tavares would do so in a way that was basically a high pace, basically a very fun but risky method. Tavares would speed through the neutral zone, get a lot of carry-ins, but he'd allow a lot of carry-ins also. So you'd have a very back-and-forth game with John Tavares on the ice. And the Isles would still come out ahead because if you having a back-and-forth game, except the finisher on one end is John Tavares, there are very few finishers on the opposing team who can keep up with John Tavares in an offense-for-offense struggle. Franz Nielsen, on the other hand, would get a lot of carry-ins, but also negate opposing ability to do so. He'd be defensively sound in the neutral zone. And so opponents wouldn't be able to get rushes while Franz would. And Barzal does the same thing. Barzal's actually the top Islander player in the neutral zone this year. And he's great defensively and great offensively. That article is on Lighthouse Hockey. And so you see that with Barzal. You see that with basically everything. And so he basically skews the whole picture. That's great. You need players who just skew the ice. Josh Hosang showed some signs of that last year. And in fact, in the neutral zone this year, Hosang still shows some signs of that. But again, it's a very small sample. Beauvier does not show that at all. Incidentally, our last bottom sixer who I haven't discussed is Cal Clutterbuck, who has been lousy this year, and sort of has been lousy last year as well. I'm not really sure what there is to say about that. Basically, Clutterbuck's going to be on our fourth line unless they manage to trade him, and I can't see them trading the contract. It just is what it is. Moving over to the defense really quickly here. Like I said, the defense is a lot less interesting this year. You have, I'm not sure what you respond to about Richard Park, Mike. I love Park, but Park is closer to Cizikas than anything of these players. You'll notice here that when I adjust, so the Islanders have played 8 defensemen at least 5 games. Seidenberg's got 6 games, Pulov's got 7 now. You notice that 7 of the 8 are above average in Corsi. Basically, if you have all 6 of your defensemen above average, you're having a good time, even if none of them are dominant, and none of them are dominant so far. The problem is, of course, that last one, Dennis Seidenberg has been awful. He is the only Islander defenseman being outshot, and it's ugly. And it's not really clear why they would even bother playing him at this point. They shouldn't. They should stop playing Dennis Seidenberg. He's old. He's only getting worse. He wasn't been good the last few years. Yeah. The good news is that I think they figured that out. They didn't play him for a while. They played him for a few games in a row, and then last game he was scratched. I suspect they're going to keep the same D, but I didn't see D pairings today. There weren't D pairings today, were there? Let's see. Look at this up right now to see if they announced D pairings. No, they didn't. So I don't know. I don't know who the D will be for next game, but I suspect Seidenberg will be out. But as you can see here, there's been a debate about whether you do Alan Pelech, Scott Mayfield, Ryan Pulock. There isn't really much of a difference in terms of possession. Doesn't mean there's no difference in the 3 players right now. I would prefer playing Pulock and Mayfield to Pelech if I had a choice. And definitely play Thomas Hickey. Do not scratch Thomas Hickey. The team has been much better with Hickey on the ice. But at the same time, because you can see Hickey's our top defenseman in this. At the same time, there really isn't a gap here. They've played equally well, roughly, with everyone, except for Seidenberg, who should literally just never be seen again. And in fact, the Isles have 2 defensemen in the AHL right now who are probably more NHL ready than Seidenberg is, in Sebastian Aho and Devin Tays. Tays is actually having a not high down year in terms of points in the AHL. Not sure how many people have noticed that, whereas Aho is lighting it up right now. I still think Tays is probably the first call-up if there is defenseman injuries, but unfortunately, I suspect the team would rather have Seidenberg. I don't know. It's a problem, but it's such a minor one considering the rest of the defense that, again, the problem is the forward lines and that gap between the top six and bottom six, not the defense, which is nice. Again, we've gone through the whole Barzil thing. Barzil affects everything. By the way, this is what I was talking about with Hosang and Nelson this year. When Hosang and Nelson were together, they were outshot 48-20. When either of them was without the other one, they were basically, hold on a second, filters, exclude. Sorry. This is now just games they're together. When Nelson is without Hosang, he's better than with Hosang. When Hosang is without Nelson, he's significantly better. Yeah, you basically want. I mean, that's the issue right now. Is I'm not sure where Hosang plays in the top six, and you probably, if you call him up, want him to play in the third line. And so I think you would do something like you promote Nelson to play with Barzil to limit the Nelson problem, and you play Hosang alongside maybe Quine and Chimera. It's really not good. Sorry, Hosang, Quine, and Ladd is your third line. That would be your third line there. And then your fourth line being Chimera, Cizikas, Clutterbuck, and you hope things go well. Again, that relies on Alan Quine being okay, but I'd rather play Hosang with Ladd and Quine and working with that. The Isles really could use a third line center who's good at possession. I mean, honestly, I would try, and people would think this silly, but I would try putting Cizikas at third line and just playing Quine as fourth line and playing Quine very little. And so you go Ladd, Cizikas, Hosang, and I think that would work very well. But I'd be very skeptical the Isles do that. I mean, they have shown signs of it this year. I kind of like Cizikas in third line. But they really could use another center. Is really the Isles' forward need right now. Yeah. So, I mean, the issue right now is basically a lot of what we thought in the offseason, to be honest. If you remember, for those of you who went to my I think test stream from this offseason, the thing which I suggested the Isles would do to most improve would be basically to sign two or three forwards who were these middling, non-scoring forwards who were known for basically driving play. There's always a bunch of these guys every year. You got your Winnecks, your Cullens, those type of guys who are out there every year, not paid very much, who can hold down a bottom six. The Isles instead decided to let their bottom six rock. It has not gone well. And the thing with those guys is you still can acquire them. They tend to be a little more pricey in terms of trades in the middle of the season. It's another reason why you should tend to sign those guys in the offseason, because if the season goes poorly, guys like Dan Winnick or Matt Cullen tend to be decent trade chips, even if they're not, game changers. But, for example, if the Isles were to replace Kuhlman, Chimera, Quine, and Clutterbuck with four, let's say, $1 million players, you could improve things. It doesn't look like, I'd be very skeptical they do much. But I could be wrong. Hosang obviously replaces one of them. Beauvillier, maybe he improves enough. And again, he's young, he can do that. If Nelson goes to second line, that promotes Ladd to third line, and that helps a bit. Because I think Ladd works better. Ladd is basically this type of guy who works well alongside others and doesn't harm anyone. So I think Ladd works well in the third line. And we'll see. I mean, maybe Dal Colle does something. I'm very, very skeptical. Just what it is. Maybe Steve Bernier comes up and is not total garbage, but he was pretty garbage before. Yeah, so, I mean, just to maybe show a little more of this right here, I apologize. I'm going to try and do what I call this really janky script going right here. So that's the wrong one. That's hold on a second. This is gonna be very janky, but I'm trying it anyhow. so I can show you what I'm looking at, what I mean by some of the neutral zone stuff. 29s, Chimera, Nelson. Yeah, so hold on a second. There you go. So this is some of the results of my neutral zone tracking, incidentally, which basically is very simply, it's showing right here the neutral zone results with, say, Nelson and Chimera, just to show this some more things I'm talking about. When the two of them are on the ice together, the team is a little worse than average in the neutral zone. Their offensive zone numbers are ass, but they're being out-entered, meaning opponents are making more entries. Opponents are making 43% of their entries by carry-in compared to 41% for the Isles. When Chimera is alone, the team is basically still the same in the neutral zone. The team is doing about basically the same on offense, maybe fractionally better, but is allowing a higher rate of opponent carry-ins because Chimera is ass at defense. When Nelson's without Chimera, the team is actually allowing a lot more entries, though it's making them more by dump-ins. And when they're both off the ice, again, because this means the bottom six is off the ice, the team is kicking ass. You can see that the dramatic changes right here. I guess I can't really... Yeah, the pointer is the pen right now, but you see what I'm showing right here. That didn't work so well. You get the point. Yeah, so this is the type of thing we can do with the neutral zone stats. I can sort of see how players are working together and not working together. But basically here, again, very simply put, you've got a top six, you've got a bottom six that's a total mess, whether it be in the neutral zone or just elsewhere. Special teams has been special teams. Goaltending has been goaltending. I saw some talk this Staple and some other people have basically talked about the goalies being an area the Isles might want to upgrade, and that seems a bit premature. Both Greiss and Halak are average goaltenders for their careers, basically, or slightly above average. Neither of them is at the age where, they're at the age where you expect them to get a little worse every year, but neither of them are at the age where you expect them to drop off a cliff. And so you expect both guys to play better going forward. You expect both guys to play about average. Which is if they do, the Owls will start winning a little more games. There's no reason to panic about goaltending. There's no reason to try desperately to upgrade the goaltending. The goaltending is fine. Goaltending is the thing that gets changed in small samples. It's totally possible the goaltending goes into the tank just because of a random chance, and the Owls lose some standing points. But for the most part, we have no reason to expect it to do so. The goaltending is fine. But yeah, so that's basically the issues right now facing this team right now. They're a two-line team with two very much worse lines. They've got one bottom sixer, Casey Cizikas, who's done his job this year, and then 5 guys who have not. And one of those guys, of course, is hurt. So that's that. So I figured this is a good time to switch over to Q&A questions. So I'm actually going to tweet out that anyone wants to come in and ask me questions. I can do that. Hold on a second. Let me just tweet out that we're doing that right now. Okay, tweeted that out. Okay. So I'll wait for some questions right now. If you have any, please ask in the chat. You know, preferably IL specific, but if needed, I will answer some non-IL specific ones. Anyone? I'll give you this to 9:50 to get any questions. After that, I guess I'm just going to cut off the stream. So I can go run, which would be nice. Bueller. Oh, here we go. Okay, first question. Ray Lynch, do you think they will cut Chimera and bring back Hosang soon? I'm curious right now. Hosang has done solidly in the AHL right now. He has 6 points in 6 games, so he's at a point per game. And he's had a bunch of really nice plays. I don't think they're going to cut Chimera. Again, as I said before, I think it's far more likely that that Wade probably is equally frustrated with Chimera and Beauvillier, and both of them have very similar both scoring and possession numbers. Chimera's been worse, and Chimera you probably expect to be worse, but the Isles don't need to waive Beauvillier to send him down, and right now they don't need to waive anyone. And so the question is really, I don't expect them to cut Chimera, though they could scratch him for a game. I expect Beauvillier to be scratched more likely. I'm still not sure whether they bring Hosang back or not. It may very much depend on what their scouts are saying Hosang is doing in the AHL, not just his points. I would bring him back. I think it's stupid. We've gone over this before. They might bring a guy like Steve Bernay up instead to be your 13th forward because they have an extra spot right now. It'd be one of those two. I guess they probably bring Hosang back is my guess, because they can do that. And then they maybe scratch a guy like Beauvillier, though I imagine if they bring Hosang back, he'll have a short leash. And again, I don't think that's right, but Emtrico. I would have thought Beauvillier would have been the first guy in the minors. They sent back Hosang instead. They obviously like Beauvillier more than the numbers show. They kept Beauvillier all of last year when his numbers were ass, and they were ass pretty quickly. And they could have basically saved a year of control by sitting him down after 30 games, even if they lost an ELC year on Beauvillier. They didn't do that. They kept him. Now, Wade's obviously frustrated with Beauvillier, but at the same time, again, I would imagine Beauvillier will get in the minors at some point this year. That said, they seem to have a higher tolerance for his poor play than some of the other players. I think because you don't really see him make risky plays that often. It's just the end results on average aren't great. So I don't know. I mean, that's the type of player that a coach might give more tolerance to. But it depends on how other players are playing as well. If Kuhlman is out for a while, they don't need to demote Bo to call up another player, which means Bo stays until maybe Prince gets healthy. Eric, very good question. Who are the biggest regressions you expect for the next 15 games? Outside the goaltending, which I think is the biggest one, the goaltending will be better. It's what goaltending should be around average. It's not. It will be. And there's no reason to expect it won't be. But if you're not talking the goaltending, and I think the biggest worry regression-wise is Matt Barzal. Barzal has been as good as you could possibly have hoped for, but there does seem to be a trend of rookie players, and sometimes it takes an offseason for the league to adapt, and them taking a little bit of a slide. And Barzal has been so good that it's almost hard to believe that these numbers are real. You almost think that he drops back from being elite to just very good. Now that's a problem because his team is relying a lot on Matt Barzal. But he's probably the player I picked to regress the most. That doesn't mean I'll be right. Barzal's 20. He's basically as young as Beauvillier. And maybe he'll somehow improve. That would be insane. But I kind of expect Barzal to be the guy to regress the most from the skaters. Everyone else is basically performing as expected. Frico, Shane Prince. Prince is a good question. Prince has had a weird career. When he was on Ottawa that year, whenever they played him, Prince had really good numbers, and then they would basically play him with crappy players and then not give him the opportunities. The Isles took a very good chance. I really liked that trade for Shane Prince. The numbers were pretty good to do that, and then Prince has basically been awful for the Isles for 2 years. Now, a lot of that was under Cappy, but he wasn't very good under Wade either. And so I have very little confidence in Shane Prince at this point. It was a gamble that made a lot of sense. But at the same time, Eric, his rate stats, scoring-wise, with Ottawa were still solid. Again, small samples, but that's the type of player who you should take a chance on. The Isles took a chance on him. It didn't work out. I expect the Isles, if the bottom two lines are struggling, to give Prince another shot. I expect this to be his last shot on it. I was kind of surprised they brought him and Quine back, but they did. But that's sort of where Shane Prince sort of fits in. Again, not very hopeful, but maybe there is. Sometimes maybe he's basically been injured for a while. It's hard to know. But I would basically not put too much faith in Shane Prince adding much. Again, the same as Alan Quine. But we could be wrong, and the bottom six have been bad enough that you probably plug him in there just because you want to change. But it sounds like he's just skating with the team now, and they probably don't call him up till December. So they have some time. They have about 8 more games until Prince might be ready, and it might be longer. So that's sort of where Prince is. That's the problem right now, is that there isn't really and I don't see anyone in the A right now as a clear fourth liner. The Isles' best prospects in the AHL are Hosang, and then a lot of defensemen, and you're not likely to see Mitch Van de Sappel or Parker Wotherspoon this year in any shape or form, who would be one of the other defensemen the Isles really like, who's in the minors right now. Bridgeport's forward core is not very good, and hasn't been for a long time. So you don't really expect to see fourth liners coming out from Bridge. Anyone else? It's about 5 to 10. Mayfield. I probably should have talked more about Mayfield. Okay, that's a fair question. Mayfield's peripherals have been good. They actually started really good. In fact, Mayfield's numbers last year were very good. Mayfield and Hickey were very good together last year. And in fact, they've been very good together this year. The neutral zone numbers are sparkling. In fact, why don't I just call those up right now? Because I can. So, your Scott Mayfield's Thomas Hickey neutral zone numbers. So, this is the two of them together. You see, Mayfield, ignore the third line, which is just Mayfield without Hickey, because that's basically a tiny, tiny sample size.
But with the two of them together, you have a 52% neutral zone number, which is really, really good. And they're making 153 entries to 134 for opponents. The opponents are actually getting more carry-ins than the Isles are with the two of them on the ice together. But, it's just sort of they're out-entering the opponents enough to make it really worthwhile. Mayfield's numbers have been very good. Hickey's numbers have been great with basically everyone. Mayfield seems to have matured into a solid defenseman. He's got very good instincts, it seems, in terms of when to pinch, when to do things in the offensive zone. I like him a lot there. He doesn't have the speed. He never will have the speed. And the shot, he'll score a few points here or there, but he's not really the biggest shot. But you've got a very solid third-pair defenseman in there. Is he more than that? I'm not sure. I don't think so. Maybe he can fit into a second pair. But he's certainly a quality player. And every now and then he does an offensive zone move where he carries in, dodges a player, and makes an amazing pass, and you go, what the hell? Me and Corey Snyder, Shutdown Line on Twitter, who does a lot of neutral zone tracking, have had these two games where we see these plays and you go, wait, what the hell? Scott Mayfield? Really? I think this is for real. Because, again, we saw this last year in the small sample. The numbers showed it. The numbers still seem to like it. It's just he's not young. He's 25 or 24 at this point. So he's probably about where he's going to be. He's not going to get much better than this. But this is a reasonable expectation for him to keep this. And again, I'm not sure that makes him one of our top 6 defensemen. Him and Pelech have basically been very around equal as terms of average or above average third pair defensemen. But it certainly makes him worthy of a spot and worthy of getting playing time. I would almost use him, Pelech, and maybe Pulock in such a way that you give them each off nights on, say, back-to-backs, or, depending on how many games you have in a row, as interchangeable, just to sort of keep rotating into fresh defensemen, rather than trying to stick necessarily to the same lineup. But it's really hard to know at this point. Anyone else? Okay, last 2 minutes. So one more question or 2 more minutes with nothing, and then I will call another one. Okay, I think that's about it. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed. Hope this was interesting and amusing. At the very least, maybe you learned something. And hopefully the Isles can work into... Mtrico, prime deadline trade target. Okay, fine. One last question. Fine. Again, you'd like to make a big splash. I'm not really sure this big splash to be made. I'm still sort of bracing for the inevitable Calvin DeHaan trade because they've got a lot of these third-pair defensemen they like. They extended Pelech, which I didn't quite understand. And DeHaan is one of the most underrated defensemen in the league. It would be a mistake to trade. But they did not extend him, which makes it sound like they don't anticipate re-signing him. So you got to figure DeHaan's in the block. And then a couple of defense prospects or draft pick and could certainly make a play for a second line or third line forward. Who that is right now, I don't know. A guy who I would be looking at, for example, would be, hold on, I'm going to actually call him up right now really quickly because I can do that. This is a video stream. I want to go. I'll do it after this. Is Benoit Pouliot.
who has been very good this year. Can, on average, in years past, has provided some pretty good scoring for bottom sixer. This is him in the last 3 years. He's been very good this year for Buffalo. This is not counting this year. He's been very good this last couple of years for a bunch of teams. Been a very solid third liner. And Buffalo is going absolutely nowhere. I don't think you need to give DeHaan to get Pouliot. I think that's probably a cheaper acquisition that you could probably do. Like I said, DeHaan probably goes for someone more valuable. I don't know who that is. But Pouliot would be like a guy who I'd be very much looking into. Trying to think of other teams who are basically garbage right now who you could possibly get players for. I mean, I guess if you want to go big, because I expect Vegas to collapse real hard. Vegas is not good. But I guess if we're going big, Colorado doesn't really have anyone that they're going to trade. Anaheim's all injured, so they're not trading anyone. I don't think Florida's trading Dadonov, which would be the guy you go for. Maybe Vegas would trade James Neal. That'd be, I guess, the guy, which would be a big splash, but I'm not really sure. Again, it's really hard to know. It's a long time away. But Pouliot isn't like the guy who I'm sort of looking at right now. And that's about it. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Hope you all enjoyed. And that'll be that. So have a good night, everyone.